Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Got a great show for you tonight. We're going to be diving into riboflavin, otherwise known as vitamin B2. Hey, if you've got questions about vitamin B2 or if you've got general health questions, go ahead and pipe those into the feed now. We'll do our best. I'll get to them hopefully before the end of the night if we don't have too many questions. And if you're new to the Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain show, go ahead and let me know where you're tuning in from. Say hello, don't be a stranger. Say hello to our community. So, without further ado, let's dive into vitamin B2 on the Ultimate Crash Course, otherwise known as riboflavin. So, we'll start with kind of a general understanding of what riboflavin is, B2. Let's see here. Let's get a better color than that. There we go. So, riboflavin, aka vitamin B2, is a water-soluble vitamin. It's part of the B vitamin complex. And water-soluble means that basically it's soluble in water, so when you take it in, it has a relatively short half-life, not a great storage in the body. The half-life is about 48 hours, meaning that if you take riboflavin as a supplement, within about 48 hours, most of that will be out of you. So from a food perspective, it's important to get riboflavin in on a daily basis, every day within your diet, because it leaves your body so quickly. So keep that in mind. It's not like fat-soluble vitamins where you can take, like the vitamin D, where we've talked about, large dosing, where you can take large doses and it'll stay with you for a relatively longer period of time. This will be out of you within 48 hours pretty quickly, and so it's very important to get daily intake. Otherwise, you can start to manifest some of the symptoms of deficiency, which are, by the way, written right here. So let's zoom in on the image here. You've got a number of different symptoms. I'm going to highlight a few of these because some of these are super common and actually more common than others. So some of the big ones, this is a big one. Light sensitivity or photosensitivity is a very common manifestation. So if you're the kind of person that you find yourself reaching for your sunglasses every time you get in the car and you're driving home, you can't handle the bright lights, this is where you need to think about riboflavin as a potential. So again, photosensitivity, light sensitivity, a very common manifestation of riboflavin deficiency. Now you'll see here, there's several different ones with a mouth on them, right? Inflammation in the mouth, cracked or chapped lips, cracked corners of the mouth ulcers, as well as magenta or dark purple discoloration of the tongue. So these are also very common. They cluster together, and they generally tend to manifest not just riboflavin, but all B vitamins. So particularly B3, B2, B6, B12, and folate are the ones that we'll see most commonly with these oral symptoms, these oral manifestations. So again, inflammation of the mouth in general, and then we have cracked or chapped lips. So if you're, reaching for the Carmex or the chapstick or your lipstick, on a frequent basis because your lips are super dry, again, that might be vitamin B2 deficiency. If you are dealing with the cracks in the corners of the lips, here in the corners, those cracks like that, very common symptom of vitamin B2 deficiency. As a matter of fact, in my practice, this one I probably see more than the others, just again in my own personal experience in helping people. And then mouth ulcers, which interestingly we talked about just last week. We talked about mouth ulcers and how gluten can cause mouth ulcers, but also vitamin B2 deficiency and then the magenta tongue. So these, again, oral manifestations of vitamin B2 deficiency. Now, one of the other more common things that we'll see is fatigue. Fatigue, very, very common. And let's talk a little bit about why, without trying to bore you too much with the biochemistry. So I'm going to make a little bit of room here on the board. Why? So a couple of the names for riboflavin, and if you ever took biochemistry in high school or college, you may remember this term FAD. FAD stands for flavin adenine dinucleotide. And this is oftentimes in your textbook in biochemistry, but they don't tell you, your instructors very rarely tell you that FAD is actually vitamin B2. But remember, flavin This is riboflavin. That's the word, which basically means yellow. And this is one of the reasons why your urine is bright yellow when you take riboflavin. It turns bright yellow. So here's one of the things I get. Some doctors will say to their patients, oh, you're just peeing out expensive urine when you're peeing out riboflavin. Remember, riboflavin has a very short half-life. So of course it's going to turn your pee yellow. It doesn't mean you're peeing it all out. It's a dye. It actually is used in a number of food preps as a coloring agent because of its very vivid yellow color. So if you're taking a B complex, for example, and you're peeing a bright yellow into the toilet, that's actually being caused by the flavonoid, or the flavin rather, not flavonoid, the flavin from riboflavin. So back to the biochemistry, FAD transports hydrogen. So the way energy production works in your cell is there's a process called the ETC. The ETC, again, I don't want to get too biochemical. The electron transport chain, this is a chemical reaction that occurs inside your mitochondria. And you've all probably heard that the mitochondria are where energy is created. It's oftentimes referred to as the powerhouse of the cell. So flavonine adenine dinucleotide, or riboflavin, FAD, picks up hydrogen and becomes FADH, and it transports the hydrogen, drops it off at what's called the ETC. So it's basically carrying that hydrogen to a pumping system or a pumping station where that hydrogen can help pump these different channels that help generate what we know as ATP. ATP is what your body needs to make energy, right? So if you don't have riboflavin, you don't have much energy, you're going to get quite fatigued. So this again, you don't have to remember the biochemistry here. This isn't going to be a biochemistry test for you. But FAD, for some of you, you may be shaking your head. Yes, I remember. Some of you nurses, maybe some of you who are professionals out there remember learning about FAD in biology or chemistry. Again, this is where it comes from. So I wanted you guys to understand that. So fatigue, because of the low ability to generate energy, and this is especially true in individuals who eat plenty of food. So you get plenty of calories per se, but you can't convert those calories into ATP, and riboflavin deficiency is one of the things that can cause that. Now, another common one is the skin inflammation. This has actually been shown. So if you've got eczema, if you've got unexplainable skin inflammation, you might want to think riboflavin, especially if you've got the fatigue and the light sensitivity and the mouth manifestations as well. Again, all of those things contribute to or can be symptoms of riboflavin deficiency. Now, there are a few others on this list, and these are, again, a little less common, but you can see here migraines. Riboflavin is one of the ingredients used as a prophylactic, meaning a preventative for migraine headaches, for headache triggers in general. If you ever look at some of these formulas that are designed, these nutritional support formulas that are designed for migraineurs, you're commonly going to see vitamin B2 and B12 and magnesium as common agents in these formulas. And B2, of course, because B2 is critical as a prophylactic for migraines. And we'll talk about why in just a minute. It actually plays a role with these three nutrients together play a role in that. Hair loss can be a manifestation of riboflavin deficiency. Sore throat. So if you don't have an infection, but your throat is constantly sore, you're constantly struggling with a sore throat, then that could be a vitamin B2 deficiency. Digestive issues. Right, digestive issues, indigestion, you got GI pain. Those are things that can manifest as riboflavin deficiency. And again, in babies, this is more not in adults, right? But in babies, we can get abnormal growth. Riboflavin, again, what did I show you earlier? It's critical for energy production. If you don't have that energy production, it's really hard for babies to grow on cue and on target when they're not making adequate energy from their food. Let's talk a little bit about that migraine piece. So one of the things that riboflavin is important for is for getting rid of homocysteine. Now, I've talked about homocysteine a lot. Homocysteine is a neurotoxin. It's a vascular toxin. And so it can contribute to migraines. It can contribute to heart disease. And it can contribute to diabetes and cancer and bone loss. Very powerful. And this is a simple thing to measure in your bloodstream. If you're not asking your doctor when you go in for your annual checkups to measure this, you should be. Because it can be a reflection of B12 and B2 as well as folate. So many of you are familiar with folate. Many of you are probably familiar with MTHFR. This is methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. This is the name of the enzyme that many people test for the genetic mutation for, the genetic SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism. But this MTHFR, for it to properly work, you need vitamin B2. Everybody's always focused on taking methylfolate with an MTHFR SNP, but very few times do you hear people talking about vitamin B2 being important for that enzyme to work. It's because vitamin B2 helps that enzyme work that folate is helpful at regulating homocysteine. So this is one of the connections. Okay, B12, B2, folate, all can help lower homocysteine. Important that you understand that interconnected relationship. Okay, let's move over here. What causes vitamin B2 deficiency? So the biggest thing on my list, you guys probably already know this, is gluten. And why does gluten cause vitamin B2 deficiency? Because it causes intestinal damage or inflammation, right? And if we're causing intestinal inflammation, we tend to get malabsorption, and vitamin B2 is part of that equation, right? So gluten-induced intestinal inflammation can create malabsorption, which can lead to riboflavin deficiency. You'll see here inflammatory bowel disease, which is, we're talking about that one of the gluten-related ones. We got celiac, we've got ulcerative colitis, and then we've also got Crohn's disease. The three primary forms of inflammatory bowel disease can all contribute to loss of nutrients. We know gluten can contribute to these three. So inflammatory bowel diseases we know can cause vitamin B2 deficiency. Another one is aggressive exercise. Aggressive exercise. Now, when I say aggressive exercise, I'm not talking about those of you who like to, do a triathlon, or those of you who like to go to the CrossFit gym and work out a little bit more than the average bear. I'm talking about those of you who overtrain, those of you who don't take enough rest, those of you who work and train your muscles to such a huge degree that you put yourself at risk for the development of deficiency. Remember, aggressive exercise increases the demand for nutrients, and riboflavin being one of the most important regenerators. Another one of its functions that's important to understand is it regenerates glutathione. Now, raise your hand if you've heard of glutathione. Most of you have. Glutathione is the master antioxidant in the body, and vitamin B2 helps to regenerate it. Remember, glutathione is a lot like a cell phone battery. It can be recharged. But if you run out of battery and you don't have a charging cord, you're out of business. B2 is the charging cord for glutathione, so it's super important to regenerate your antioxidant status after exercise. We know, we've actually done research in athletes, and so we know that the 2-a-day training for, before football practice, the heavy weights, the super heavy, aggressive forms of exercise over long periods of time depletes the antioxidant status. And so that's going to tap into overutilization of your B2, trying to reduce the glutathione or trying to regenerate the glutathione for your body to be able to protect yourself from that excessive exercise. So aggressive exercise. Also hypothyroidism. What's interesting here, hypothyroid it's actually, let me reframe this, because hypothyroid, there's actually two things. So we know hypothyroid can contribute to B2 deficiency, but we also know that B2 deficiency can contribute to hypothyroid. You have little mechanisms inside your thyroid cells that they're called syn porters, and what they do is they help the transfer of iodine into your thyroid, where these transporters are vitamin B2 dependent. And so very, very important that you get adequate B2 for functioning of thyroid hormone. I've talked about that in depth in some of my thyroid videos. If you're not familiar, go back and watch them. Adrenal fatigue. We know that this is a big one. One of the reasons why is this has to do with cortisol. Cortisol depletes B vitamins. So long-term abundance of cortisol being produced by your body as a result of chronic stress, which is what adrenal fatigue is. Adrenal fatigue is when you've been so stressed for so long, your adrenal glands, those little organs that sit on top of your kidneys, can no longer keep up with the level of stress. And so what happens, they become fatigued. But before that happens, they're burning through cortisol. They're trying to put out cortisol for you to protect you. But when you're doing that, it's depleting that vitamin B2. We also have alcohol. Now, alcohol is a big one. Alcohol, aside from the fact that alcohol is a diuretic, right? So diuresis, anytime we use any kind of diuretic with vitamin B2, we're talking about loss, right? Diuretic or diuresis increases the loss of vitamin B2. So it's not just alcohol. Think of caffeine, or if you're a heavy coffee drinker and you're drinking 3, 4, 5 cups of coffee a day, that's diuretic. Alcohol is a diuretic. We also know alcohol and its impact on the liver and on glutathione status is going to cause you to use up more vitamin B2, again, in that effort to regenerate. So you're getting double hit with alcohol, once as a diuretic, the other as a toxin that the liver has to process and deal with. So again, any diuretic. So those of you, where's that important to understand? Any one of you listening to this, either you have aggressive caffeine intake, or maybe you're on a medicine that acts as a diuretic to do a couple different things. Number one, diuretics are a class of medication that are used to reduce blood pressure. So if you're taking like hydrochlorothiazide or Lasix, these are examples of diuretics that will cause wasting of fluid through your kidney, right? So your kidneys are pushing out more fluid, thus pushing out more vitamin B2 in your urine. So it's not the one-day use of a diuretic, it's the consistent use over time that tends to lead to, in this case, diuretics lead to B vitamin deficiency. Now, some of you may be taking diuretics because your feet swell. Doctors will commonly prescribe this. I see this a lot with women. Their feet are swelling, their ankles are swelling, so their doctor puts them on a diuretic. Or they're retaining a lot of water retention in their hands and their feet and their face, and so their doctor puts them on a diuretic. This is a trap. The diuretic itself can lead to B2 deficiency, not just B2 deficiency, multiple vitamin and mineral deficiencies, and then those deficiencies can end up increasing or creating new problems for you. Another cause of B2 deficiency is high processed foods, or a diet high in processed foods. Why? Because processed foods don't have adequate vitamin B2, but processed foods require that you use your B2, your stored B2. Remember, your body doesn't store a lot of vitamin B2, so developing B2 deficiency can happen relatively fast. B2 not stored to any great degree in the body, okay? It's not that it's not stored at all, it's just not stored very well, okay? So if your diet is full of processed food does not have vitamin B2, but processed food requires B2 to convert it into ATP. Remember, I showed you that little biochemistry lesson earlier. We said that you need vitamin B2 to make ATP. Well, this happens. How do we break down food? Well, one of the things that we do when we're breaking down food is we're breaking hydrogen off of the food. So let me give you an example. Glucose, when you eat a lot of processed food, you get a lot of sugar, and that glucose has hydrogen attached to it. And so what your body tries to do is it tries to break off the hydrogen, and then the FAD, the riboflavin, picks it up and becomes FADH, and it delivers it to your cells to generate ATP. Well, if you're processed food that doesn't have any B2 and you don't store a lot of B2, then you're basically eating a processed food that you can't break down very well. So instead of breaking the hydrogen off the glucose, you're left with glucose. What do you do with extra glucose? What does your body do? Well, one of the things it does is it converts it to fat and it packs it into your cells, right? Or it turns it into triglycerides and stores it in your liver, and your liver becomes fatty. So you don't want to go down this road. This is where processed foods are so horrible for us, is they don't contain nutrients to any great degree. Now, some processed foods are fortified with certain vitamins, but their synthetic versions are not as effective, and the dosing or the quantity is not all that great to deal with all the quantity of processed foods that a person's eating. So this scenario is a bad deal. You don't want to get involved in. And this is why we've always harped on avoid packaged processed foods because they're not good for you. This is just one of many reasons why. Let's talk about some of the diseases linked to riboflavin deficiency as well. Now, I mentioned migraine earlier, so we'll add that to this page because we know migraine headache is something that riboflavin can contribute to. But one of the things riboflavin can contribute to is bone loss or fractures. So if you've got a diagnosis of osteoporosis, if you find or you've got a history of easy breaks without really major trauma, you might be thinking vitamin B2. Cancers. Remember what I said earlier. Vitamin B2 regenerates glutathione. Glutathione is a very powerful anti-cancer nutrient. And so if you're not getting adequate B2, you're not regenerating glutathione. You're increasing the risk for the development of cancer. Preeclampsia. Preeclampsia, which is kind of a form of high blood pressure of pregnancy, is another component. And really, vitamin B2, but also, I'll just throw this in as bonus, magnesium. The two of those together can form a preeclampsia situation, which can make it very, very dangerous for pregnant women. Oftentimes, women with pregnancies are hospitalized over preeclampsia, so you want to be aware that B2 deficiency can cause that. So if you think about women, if you've had babies and you think about each time you develop preeclampsia, you might think magnesium and vitamin B2 in that way. Anemia. Vitamin B2 is necessary to help form red blood cells properly. So a lot of times what can happen is a deficiency in the formation of adequate red blood cells, and that can lead to anemia, which leads to lack of oxygen, which leads to fatigue. So just another way that it can affect you. Diabetes. Remember what I showed you on the previous page about, processed food, that FAD grabbing hydrogen from glucose? If you don't do that, the glucose stays as glucose. Your body will convert some of it to fat, but some of it will also stay in your bloodstream. Glucose makes your bloodstream sticky. It sticks onto your proteins. It's called glycation. When too much sugar in your bloodstream starts to attach itself to the proteins and the hormones that circulate in your bloodstream, elevating your blood sugar, contributing to the development of diabetes. Seborrheic dermatitis. I said earlier that riboflavin deficiency, one of the symptoms, is inflammation of the skin. Well, this is one of the specific diseases, is seborrheic dermatitis. So if you've been to your dermatologist, they've looked at your inflammation on your skin and they gave you this diagnosis, you might think vitamin B2 deficiency. Cataracts. Those of you who've had cataract diagnoses, vitamin B2 contributes to the health of your lens and of your eyes. High blood pressure. We mentioned that a minute ago, which isn't it ironic that a lot of the treatments for high blood pressure. So again, the diuretic, let's make room because this is worth drawing. Diuretic reduces B2. It doesn't just reduce B2, it reduces B1, it reduces CoQ10, it reduces magnesium, it reduces calcium, it reduces potassium. That's not vitamin K, by the way, that's potassium. Okay, and other B vitamins like B12 and folate and B6. And in so doing, to treat the blood pressure, so this is used to treat blood pressure, we reduce all these nutrients. Well, guess what? B1 deficiency causes high blood pressure, HTN, that stands for hypertension. CoQ10 deficiency causes hypertension. Magnesium deficiency causes hypertension. Calcium deficiency causes hypertension. Potassium deficiency causes hypertension. B12, folate, and B6 deficiency increase homocysteine, which causes vascular inflammation, leading to an increased risk for stroke and heart attack. So you can see, again, I'm not anti-medicine, but I'm anti, let's just say, intelligent thought processes. You got to think this through. A diuretic is not a long-term solution to a condition like high blood pressure that is lifestyle induced. You have to change your diet, you have to change your lifestyle, you got to lose the weight if you're overweight, and then you won't need this. Again, it's the long-term use of those diuretics that really start to massively deplete the nutritional status. So if your goal is to reduce heart disease through the medication, but you end up causing heart disease, okay, through the medication, then you're not getting anywhere. You're actually losing that battle. So those are the big things. Those are the big conditions linked to vitamin B2 deficiency. There's another condition, and this is kind of more of a rare thing, Brown-Violletto-von Lohr syndrome, which is a form of neurological disease. We won't get into that because it's pretty rare. It's one of the rare conditions. Let's talk next about food. What can you do to eat more vitamin B2? Number one rule, understand this. Vitamin B2 is rich in meats and vegetables. So if you've got a diet that's consistently good in whole foods, right? Whole foods, meats, vegetables, nuts, you're probably going to be decently covered as it relates to riboflavin. The biggest places we see deficiency is in when people are caloric restriction mode. So you're not eating enough, okay? So you're just not getting enough overall calories and not getting enough vitamin B2 in that caloric restriction. We'll see it in people who, again, remember what I said earlier, diuretics or caffeine, those types of things, okay? And we'll see it with processed diets. These are the big, kind of the most common, right? But if you're eating whole, real food, you're not generally going to need a diuretic. You may be doing caloric restriction, but if you're underweight or if you're losing weight rapidly or if you're working your way from an obese state to a normal weight, caloric restriction can actually be helpful. But you do want to make sure that if you're doing that, if you're working with a doctor, that you're measuring your vitamin status so that you don't run into this problem. But these are the foods, okay? These are some foods that you can eat more of. They're bang for bang, right? Bang for buck. These are going to have more vitamin B2 in them. So leafy greens, mushrooms, seaweed, pastured eggs, broccoli, green beans, bell peppers, almonds, sweet potato, salmon, sardine, Brussels sprout, and winter squash. Now, you could add a lot of other things to this list, but these are really high in vitamin B2. So if you have a diet rich or enriched with these different foods, you should be covering some pretty good bases along the lines for need for B2. Now, let's talk next about vitamin B2. Maybe some of you are supplementing or are interested in supplementing. What do we look for? What do we look for in terms of a high quality riboflavin or vitamin B2 supplement? Well, the first thing we look for is a compound called riboflavin. And don't stop there. So a lot of supplement brands, they stop here. They put riboflavin in, but what we want is we want phosphorylated riboflavin. So riboflavin 5-phosphate. That's what you're looking for on your supplement. That term, this is the most bioactive form of vitamin B2. It's the most bioactive. It's one that your body recognizes best. Okay, now the RDA or the RDI for riboflavin, meaning that the recommended daily intake according to the government, for men is about 1.5 milligrams a day. I think this is too low, personally. Understand where these recommended daily allowances come from, as they come from old research that was designed to make people who had frank overt disease, you give them just enough where the frank overt disease is not something that we can measure through symptoms anymore, but it doesn't mean their riboflavin levels are optimized. So my advice is, if you're looking to optimize your levels, especially if you're fit and active, 30 to 50 milligrams a day is kind of a good place to look at it. And so sometimes you'll find, riboflavin in solo supplement form, which some people opt to do, take it by itself. But I like it best in a B complex because the B complex works together. The B vitamins, especially B6, folate, B12, and B2, they work very synergistically with each other. And so you want to take that B complex to get them all, so they're all working together for you. But most B complexes are going to contain, at least that quantity of riboflavin. in them. And so that's a good place to start, just in terms of making sure you're getting a good quantity each day. Nobody's ever died, or even nobody's ever really experienced major symptoms of riboflavin toxicity. There are no toxicities of riboflavin reported in the literature from supplement use. So it's not something that we would expect anybody really to ever overdose on if you're keeping it reasonable. Now, certainly the law of toxicity states that anyone who takes anything in high enough quantities for long enough periods of time can become toxic in it. So if you're taking, 1,000 milligrams of riboflavin a day and you don't have any justification for that, that's probably not a smart move. But if you're staying in this range, somewhere here, okay, this 30 to 50 milligram, even going up as high as 100 milligrams a day, you're probably going to be just fine. You'll have very yellow urine, as I mentioned before. You'll have very yellow urine, and that's normal. What that means, if your urine is super yellow, here's the good news about that. It doesn't mean you're peeing away your vitamins. It means that your GI tract, okay, your GI tract absorbed it. Okay, why? How can we know that? It means because it's coming out, yellow urine comes out the kidney, right? So we know it had to get from your GI tract to your blood so that then your kidney could filter it. If you didn't have yellow urine, I would be more concerned if you're taking a B complex or you're taking higher doses of riboflavin. So we're actually, as a marker to look for GI tract health, we're looking for yellow urine. It's, because if you don't have it and you're taking a strong multi or B complex, then you might have a GI problem that is creating malabsorption, malnutrition, and that riboflavin is never making it into your bloodstream. So much more concerned if this is the issue than not having that yellow urine. Again, riboflavin, you need some every day. It has a very short half-life and very poor storage, so you need a little every day, and it's very important to maintain that normal function. Something else you should know, riboflavin is relatively heat stable, so when you cook your foods, some people say, the raw food diet movement will say, oh gosh, if you cook your food, it loses all the nutrients. No, riboflavin is heat stable. You don't cook the riboflavin necessarily out of your food. Number two, there are some foods that are preserved with ethylene oxide, which is a chemical gas, and this is usually like dried fruit. So if you're a dried fruit fanatic, if you're buying the dried mango or the raisins or whatever it might be, if they're gassing that fruit with this compound, you're actually destroying the vitamin B2. But vitamin B2 is destroyed by this compound. So my advice on dried fruit, make your own. Get yourself a dehydrator. Super easy to make dried fruit, and without all the garbage, without the processed chemicals and everything else that might come with it. So, okay, let's open it up for any questions that you guys have. Hopefully, let's try to keep it pertaining to the topic, but let's see what we got here. Hi, Dr. Osborne. I take a B complex every day. I just purchased your Ultra Nutrients. Can I take those at the same time, or should I spread them out or take one over the other? Thank you. So if you're using my Ultra Nutrients, you should know that the quantity that you want to take, let's make room. The quantity, the ideal quantity for Ultra Nutrients is 2 caps twice a day, divided doses with food. So 2 BID, that means it's Latin Byzantine, which just means twice a day. So take 2 with breakfast, 2 with lunch, or 2 with lunch, 2 with dinner. With B vitamins and multivitamins, some people report with high levels of B vitamins, if you take them after 4 p.m., it gives you energy. And so some people report having a harder time sleeping. So if you find that you're having a harder time sleeping, taking the B vitamins or the multi after 4, just adjust your time before 4 p.m. But what you can do, you can take a B complex with a multivitamin. You're getting higher doses of B vitamin because the multi contains a B complex in it as well. So you can take, for example, if you're using Ultra Nutrients, you can take 2 Ultra Nutrients and 1 of the B complex at the same sitting, and that's not going to create a problem for you. So hopefully that takes care of your question. How much B2 should be in a B complex vitamin? It depends. There are a number of different formulations. I err on the side of heavier in my B complex and lower in my multivitamin. My multivitamin has a B complex in it, so those of you who use our products like Ultra Nutrients or Multi-Nutrients, you can compare that level of vitamin B2 to what's in our B complete, which is our B vitamin complex. And our B vitamin complex is a lot higher, but on purpose, because the whole premise is to push higher levels, therapeutic levels of B vitamins into a person. Let's see, Linda, I thought I was taking good amounts of vitamins and minerals, but still having issues. I was told I drink too much water and tea. Could I be flushing the vitamins out, leading to deficiency? Not so much. I mean, yes, you can. So remember too, I've mentioned a number of times that diuretics deplete, and water, if you drink too much, is a diuretic, right? You ever think about it? When you drink a lot of water, you're running to the bathroom a lot. It's a diuretic. It's increasing your urinary output, which is carrying your B vitamins out of you. So it's not, but there's a point. Some people overdo water. They hear we all hear the kind of wives' tale of drink 6 8-ounce glasses a day is what you actually require, and that's not true. Nobody's ever proven that. Water is one of those things that it's based on who you are and what you do. It's based on your body weight. It's based on your age. It's based on your exercise level, and it's based on your diet, because many of the things you look at leafy greens, most of that's water. Mushrooms, most of its consistency is water. Sweet seaweed, most of it is water. Sweet potato, majority of it's water. So if you're eating real whole foods, you're getting water. You may need to drink less water because you're eating food that contains water in it. And that's a mistake some people make, is they're running to the bathroom 8 or 10 times a day because they're over consuming water. So if you're drinking a lot of water, yes, especially if you're drinking a reverse osmosis RO water, because that can actually, if you're drinking large quantities, over abundant quantities of RO water, you can actually end up dehydrating yourself. So hopefully that helps you answer that question. Is it enough if I am taking B complex every day? Enough for what, Tahia? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. What if you have a methylation problem? What if you do have a methylation problem? If you have a methylation problem, you can still take vitamin B2. Remember what I said earlier, vitamin B2 supports MTHFR. It supports the normalization toward the proper metabolism of folate if you have a genetic mutation. Why kidney stones during fasting? You could be oxalate dumping, depending on the type of stones that you have. If you passed a bunch of stones when you're fasting, and you analyze those stones, usually your doctor will analyze them. Oxalate's the most common kidney stone. But if you are fasting, then your body will mobilize and push a lot of oxalate out of you, and that can create an oxalate dumping effect. And so if you're already predisposed to kidney stone issues, then you may have found that actually is increasing it. Let's see here. Next question. How can we tell if our glutathione is low? Yeah, you measure it. Ask your doctor to measure it. Glutathione can be measured. There are a number of different tests that help to measure glutathione. My favorite, probably one of the most accurate, is an intracellular glutathione test. Oh, back that up just a little bit. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, so somebody was mentioning that their diet's really dialed in, no grain, no pain style, and they're still getting kidney stones. I'd say you might want to look at oxalates. Ask your doctor to run a 24-hour urine oxalate test to see whether or not you have high levels of oxalate, because if you do, their oxalate levels can be high in certain people. Yeast overgrowth can cause oxalate elevation. Mold exposure can cause increase in oxalates. Vitamin B6 deficiency can cause increase in oxalates. So there's a number of things that could be potentiating that for you. Let's see here. Hi from Sydney, Australia. Love your work. Can you tell me if B vitamin deficiency is behind seborrheic dermatitis? And if so, I think I answered that. Definitely, it can be behind seborrheic dermatitis. And if so, could B vitamins help? Could help blepharitis. Yes, both. Yes to both. But that being said, A person can also have dermatitis and blepharitis for other reasons beyond a B vitamin deficiency, but it's possible that B vitamin deficiencies are contributing to them. I have HLA-DQ105 and HLA-DQ307, 06. Is this gluten sensitivity? Well, if you have an HLA-DQ, so you're actually reporting those numbers to me incorrectly. So it's hard for me to make a determination. If you mean that you have an HLA-DQ1 and you also have an HLA-DQ3, yes, those are both markers for gluten sensitivity. They're non-celiac markers, so the likelihood you would develop celiac disease is less than 1%, but that doesn't mean you might not develop other problems associated with gluten exposure. Let's see, Donna's asking about, she says she can't remember what supplements you talk about for people who have had intestines taken out. So if you've had your intestines removed from an inflammatory bowel disease, generally they'll remove parts of the distal colon in that situation, if that's what you're referring to. I mean, the best thing that you can do is my multi, ultra or multi-nutrients. Multi is actually probably a better one for you because it's stronger. And this is just, it's just a multi to make sure you're getting your bases covered because you're going to have a degree of malabsorption. You also want to take, probably, again, if I'm giving you names, Omega Max. That's a good one to take to make sure you're getting your essential fatty acids, your omega-3. And then you also, depending on how well you tolerate probiotics, probably, if you've had your parts of your colon removed, I would more so recommend Biotic Force. It's one that is designed, it's a spore-based probiotic that works a little bit better for people post-surgically. So these would be things I would encourage you to look at to support your nutrition if you've had parts of your intestine removed. Let's see. My B complex capsule is so big it gets caught in my throat. If I empty into my tea, will the heat from the hot tea damage the B vitamins? It won't damage the B2, but it might damage a few of the other ones. The best way to do that, Mark, is don't put it in your hot tea, is dump it into like a smoothie. So make yourself a smoothie. You can blend in. We do smoothies with protein powders, but some people want to do fruit smoothies or vegetable smoothies or a mixture or combination of the two, or a bone broth smoothie, and those are all okay. Just dump that B vitamin mixture into that, and that way you don't damage any of the B vitamins through heat. So what's ATP again? I think I mentioned that earlier. It's adenosine triphosphate is what ATP is. It's the source of energy that our body needs cellularly to heal, repair, and do proper maintenance. Can B2 deficiency cause type 2 diabetes? That's a good question, Linda. It's probably not that B2 deficiency causes type 2 diabetes. It's more that people with type 2 diabetes, because of their highly processed diet, have a tendency to be deficient in B2, and that deficiency in B2 makes it harder to control blood sugar. But in and of itself, by itself, we're probably not going to see diabetes develop just in a vacuum as a result of vitamin B2 deficiency. Can B2 help vertigo? In my clinical experience, it's not one that I typically see with vertigo. For vertigo, more we look at B6, folate, and B12. And vitamin B1, those ones, in my experience, play a much bigger role in the vestibulocochlear nerves function around balance. So if you struggle with vertigo, that is if your vertigo is neurological. There's different kinds of vertigo. Neurological vertigo is one of them, but there are other kinds as well. Let's see, take glutathione every morning. Okay, no. Yeah, so Becky's asking if riboflavin 5-phosphate sodium is the same as vitamin B2, and the answer is yes, that is a form of vitamin 2. Let's see here, Julie. What if you have to be careful with oxalates? Many of the things mentioned as a whole foods eating plan are things like vegetables and nuts, which are higher in oxalates. That's a good question. As a matter of fact, I'm going to see if Mel can put in our link in our feed for you. I have an article with foods that are low in oxalates that also have vitamin B2. And so if you want to click on that save that for later, you can go back and you can review some of those things. Remember, riboflavins in a lot of foods, not just the ones in the board behind me here. Gene wants to know, do I have a favorite B complex? Yeah, I do. I'm biased because I designed it, but it's called B Complete. And you can pick that up if you're looking for it. B Complete. That's at Gluten-Free Society, gfs.org. Glutenfreesociety.org. It's called Be Complete. And right now, I think there's a code for it. If you use the code when you check out Bingo, it's like there's like a $7 discount right now. So if those of you who aren't sure and you're just wanting to try something and you want to try that, save yourself some money in the process. Let's see, keep going down on that side. Yeah, so John says, my aunt's on hydrochlorothiazide, trying to get her off of it, trying to get her to take B1 for beriberi, but she won't listen. Hey, you might send her some of my past videos on vitamin B1, and because I talk a little bit more in depth about that topic, and that might be helpful for her to maybe change her mind, hopefully. I mean, the least she could do is take a B complex to offset a little bit that diuretic. Does stress lower the vitamin B in your body? Absolutely. I didn't mention that earlier. Thanks for asking the question, Lynn. Stress is definitely a cause of B vitamin deficit for many reasons. I did mention cortisol. When a person's under chronic stress, they make more cortisol. Cortisol causes the loss of those nutrients, including the B vitamins, which is kind of a catch-22. Could having a hair analysis help indicate whether someone has vitamin and or mineral deficiencies? No, not really. I mean, where hair analysis is helpful is not as a standalone test. A lot of practitioners try to use hair analysis as the end-all be-all to determine whether or not a person has a nutritional deficiency. Where a hair analysis test is fails completely, so don't ever use a hair analysis test if you're trying to measure vitamins. You can't measure vitamins in a hair analysis. It's not possible, not without tons of speculation. Minerals, on the other hand, you can get an idea of your mineral status to a certain extent, but this should not be used as a standalone. This should be used in addition with intracellular and serum levels, okay? It's important because minerals are, unlike vitamins, most vitamins work inside the cell. That's why the best way to measure them is using an intracellular type of test. But minerals work in the cell, in the blood. They work in a lot of different compartments, and so you want to get as many measurements quantitatively so that you can come to a great objective point as to what a person might be low in. But a hair analysis by itself, a lot of doctors will try to use that, but in my experience, they're extrapolating. They're making way too much out of hair analysis than what was ever intended for it to be. Where we look at hair analysis is if we suspect somebody's being exposed to toxic metal, and if we're seeing, for example, high levels of cadmium growing out on their hair, high levels of arsenic. This is actually sometimes how we can identify a person might be being poisoned. This is sometimes how we can identify how a person poisoned, as in somebody in their family or somebody they know is poisoning them, but also whether or not they're being poisoned, for example, by drinking drinking water that might be contaminated. So, for example, if you go back and look up Flint, Michigan, and lead, and you'll see that was a town in Michigan that had massive amounts of lead toxicity because the older infrastructure in their pipes was leaching lead. And so people were getting very, very sick as a result of that. Hair analysis can show us when those toxic metals are pouring out in the hair. They can sometimes give us insight or clue as to whether or not a person's being poisoned. So again, but by itself, not a great tool to use in singular fashion. So Helena wants to know, are B complex formulas generally well balanced relative quantities of constituents? Depends. I mean, I can't speak for all formulas. I can only speak for my own. Mine is well balanced and based on 20 years of practice, but I can't make that claim for other companies, good or bad or indifferent. Why should taking 5-HTP cause low riboflavin symptoms? So taking 5-HTP, if you're taking I'm going to assume you mean, Debbie, 5-hydroxytryptophan. If you're experiencing low riboflavin, so 5-hydroxytryptophan helps in the process along the pathway to producing serotonin, which you need a lot of methylation factor, so MTHFR, right, to be able to properly produce that serotonin. So if your methylation factors are not working very well, that 5-HTP may be burning through a little bit of your riboflavin because you need more methyl groups to attach to form serotonin. So there's a possibility that that's maybe what you're experiencing. Let's see here. This question comes up a lot. Alex is asking about nutritional yeast. I do not recommend nutritional yeast instead of supplements. I know some doctors do. I'm not a huge fan of nutritional yeast, mainly because of the way a lot of them are produced. And a lot of people I just see in my practice, I see a lot of people who are actually reactive to yeast. Like when we test them, they're reacting to the yeast. And so a lot of them have come in and they've been using things like a nutritional yeast for their supplements and still not feeling well or doing well. Always getting dehydrated. How can I prevent that? Well, dehydration comes in many flavors. It just depends on why you're getting dehydrated. I would say if you're finding yourself dehydrated on a frequent basis, the first thing you can do is analyze the water that you're drinking, the quantity of water, and the way it's being filtered. Some, again, like reverse osmosis filters can pull out the minerals in the water, and for some people that can actually over time lead to a dehydration status. So adding minerals to your water, we actually have something called ultra electrolytes that you can add to RO water that will help rehydrate you better. So Sonia says, hi, Dr. O, I have MS. I'm going to assume you mean multiple sclerosis and your red blood cell counts below normal. Do I need to take vitamin B complex to get that up? Or question mark. I don't know, Sonia. You could take a B complex. It certainly won't hurt you. And with MS, it's very common for people with MS to do to respond favorably to B vitamins, particularly vitamin B12, because it plays a role in the myelin sheath, as does vitamin B2. Vitamin B2 plays a role in the production of the myelin sheath as well. And of course, MS is a demyelinating disease. So, but as far as your red blood cell counts being low, there are other reasons why that could happen. Iron deficiency, protein deficiency. Sometimes red blood cells are low over B vitamins as well. So yes, it's not a bad idea to take them, but it may not be the solution. Testing would give you a better answer. Get with your doc about appropriate testing. Can B6 keep you from sleeping? It can, but it typically doesn't. Any B vitamin can keep you from sleeping if you take it late at night. Again, some people are more sensitive to B vitamins than others, and so, whether or not you are that type of person, I don't know. Does B2 help with swelling? Will it help to reduce it? Depends on what you mean. There's inflammation processes that can occur as a result of vitamin B2 deficiency. So if you're talking about the swelling of an inflammatory process, depending on its geographic location or its physical location in your body, possibly. Yeah, so Alex asking if I recommend all Bs, not just B2, and the answer is yes. I recommend all Bs. I think taking B2 all by itself, people can do it, but it's better if you take the Bs in a complex version. The only time I deviate in my own practice from giving people individual Bs is when we're doing deeper testing and we're seeing really major deficiencies of certain ones where I might give them even more. I'll give them a B complex, but I'll give them even more. So I might add additional riboflavin or additional B5 or additional folate, etc., depending on their person's need. Let's see here. So Hill's asking if emergency products are safe. I'm sure they're safe. They're sold in many stores, and I don't think anybody's ever died from emergency products. But as far as do they have chemicals, I don't know. I can't really speak for the manufacturing process of that particular brand. I can simply say this: a lot of vitamin C products contain genetically modified corn as the source for vitamin C, and I don't recommend that. I don't recommend any product that contains GMO corn as what we're producing it from. So if you're looking for seed that has not got GMO corn, is grain-free, check out Detox C. You can check that out on Gluten Free Society. Let's see here. Becky's asking if liposomal glutathione is required to help B vitamins get to where they need to be. No, not so much. The B vitamins can get where they need to go with it necessarily without having glutathione. So no, I don't know if that's something you heard, but that's nothing that that you need to be concerned about in a major way. What's the difference from B complex versus B vitamins? Is your multivitamin a B complex, or is Ultra Nutrients also a complex? So my multivitamins have the B family in them. So when I say B complex, what I'm referring to is all the B vitamins. They're a family, the complex of B vitamins. A multivitamin, a good multivitamin, will have the B vitamins along with other minerals and other vitamins like vitamin C and A, D, E, and K, etc. So whereas a multi is more kind of overall comprehensive, it's generally going to be lower in the quantity of B vitamins, whereas a B complex vitamin supplement is going to be generally much higher in the B vitamins, but it's going to lack the other vitamins and the other minerals. So hopefully that helps answer your question. What do I recommend in terms of B vitamins for kids? 10 months of age, 7 years, and 10 years. So 7-year and 10-year can use Ultra Nutrients or multi-nutrients, either one. We also have a kids chewable formula, which is a multivitamin kids chewable, as long as your kids are not allergic to raspberry, because we use an organic raspberry to flavor it. What's the best test for vitamin and mineral deficiency? There's not one best test, Kate. It's multiple tests. And so this is just where the doctor that you're working with has to know what in the heck they're doing. Again, it's not one. It's kind of like, what's the best test for food sensitivity or food allergy? There's multiple ways that have to be measured to be comprehensive. Can LDN deplete vitamins? LDN, I assume, Kristen, a lot of medical acronyms, right? Low dose naltrexone is what I would imagine you're talking about. Hopefully that's what you are referring to. Can it deplete vitamins? I've not seen any research that shows that LDN depletes vitamins. So to my knowledge, no. But I can't say that definitively. Let's see here. Can you get all these levels checked through your regular lab work? No, Gene, you've really got, if you want to, if you have a doctor that is an expert in nutrition, you guys have to understand, especially if you're new to the show, your average doctor took less than 7 hours of classes on nutrition. They don't know really anything. Most of them know very little. It's actually, to me, it's a travesty and kind of a joke. Because we think in our minds, we go to the doctor thinking they know everything about our human nature, our chemistry, right, our biochemistry. But nutrition is just not well represented as a class or course in medical curriculum. So you have to go to a doctor who specializes in it postgraduate, which is where most doctors, if they are experts in nutrition, they didn't get it from medical school. And so there are different postgraduate programs. I'm actually board certified, the American Clinical Board of Nutrition, which is the only postgraduate program in the world that certifies doctors beyond the graduate level to meet a minimum criteria of nutritional knowledge. So that, to me, is a bare bones place to start, and that's a 2-year program postgraduate. So, that's an additional 2 years just dedicated to nutrition. And then there's practice and experience and everything else. So, if you're, get with your doctor. Maybe he's got some postgraduate training, or she's got some postgraduate training, but the likelihood is pretty low. Most don't, especially if they're practicing traditional medicine. Let's see here. Many people asking, do B vitamins damage the kidney? The answer is no. B vitamins don't damage the kidney. That's kind of a myth. A lot of people think that, but no, actually, B vitamins have not been shown to damage the kidney. How many milligrams of migraine or of vitamin B2 for migraine sufferers? If you're trying to be prophylactic, you got to get at least 50 milligrams a day, and in some cases up to 100, 150. So 50 is where I would start. Let's see. So I don't understand your question, Brens, because you're asking me if my B complete multivitamin would be, or B complex would be suitable for somebody with intrinsic factor. And the fact of the matter is everyone has intrinsic factor. Intrinsic factor is produced by the parietal cells in the stomach to help you absorb acid. So if you mean intrinsic factor deficiency, or intrinsic factor autoimmune, like a pernicious anemia, that is a little different. And so what the case is there is if that's the case, if you have an intrinsic factor deficiency or an autoimmune process, the one you're going to have to worry about is vitamin B12. B12 requires intrinsic factor to be absorbed. The way you can bypass that is through the lozenge. And I have different options here, but probably the most effective in this case is something called methylcobalamin. So if you go to Gluten Free Society and you just type in the search engine methylcobalamin, you'll pull up our product, and it's a lozenge. And the reason why it's a lozenge instead of a pill that you swallow is because it's absorbed in your cheeks. So it's absorbed by the buccal mucosa in your cheeks, and so it bypasses the intrinsic factor issue. So if you are IF, again, intrinsic factor deficient, taking one that absorbs through your buccal mucosa bypasses intrinsic factor, you can still absorb it, and it can be just as effective. So if that's what you meant, hopefully that takes care of your question. So, hi, Dr. Osborne. I'm having issues with what sounds like an ulcer. I'm gluten and grain-free. Any suggestions on how to heal it? My leg neuropathy is worse when my stomach is hurting. You don't want to play around with something like that. If you haven't been scoped, your GI doctor might want to do a scope to confirm ulcer or not, because there are a lot of problems within the stomach that can feel like an ulcer, that symptomatically might kind of mimic an ulcer, but aren't. So clarity is the most important thing here so that you can move forward with confidence, because if you do have an ulcer, and it's truly an ulcer, there are different things and different ways to approach that. But the number one thing that has to be discovered first is what caused the ulcer. And so that's different for different people. You mentioned being grain-free, which is great because grain can cause and contribute to ulcers, as can dairy, as can other food sensitivities that you might have that you don't know about at this point. Bacterial infection can cause ulcers. H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori is a type of bacterial infection in the stomach that can contribute to an ulcer. So getting clarity first so that you know how to move forward with confidence. And that means working with a practitioner that you trust and that you feel confident that could help kind of guide you in that direction. Let's see. If nutritional deficiencies are known to be causal for certain chronic diseases, why don't they add nutrients into medications to prevent depletion? I so much love that question. I'm going to answer it because I spent an inordinate amount of resources and personal funds on this research. Actually, I teach internationally the topic drug-induced nutritional deficiencies. This is such a problem. There are medical texts written on this topic. And I used to teach this all over the world. I don't travel as much anymore, but I still do. And I still teach it, just not as aggressively as I used to. I teach it to you guys. But drug-induced nutritional deficiency is a major problem. There's multiple medical textbooks written on it. These textbooks are not covered in the average medical school curriculum. But I actually, about 15 years ago, I created a company, and I actually started a company called NutraMD. And I started this company with an internal medicine doctor. We worked in conjunction together because I was the formulator. So he used my expertise to help me understand how to formulate the right vitamins, the right minerals to go with which drugs. So we originally created 5 different products to deal with people that were on blood pressure medicine, to deal with people who were on diabetic medicine, to deal with people who were taking birth control pills, ladies, to deal with people that were taking antacids. And these products were designed to correct the nutritional deficiencies that the drug caused. And here's what happened. The people that want to take drugs don't want to take supplements. The people that want to take supplements don't want to take drugs. The doctors that prescribe drugs don't want to prescribe supplements, and the doctor that prescribes supplements don't want to prescribe drugs. So there was a huge mismatch, even trying to get this information out there. I can say that I blew a lot of doctors' minds when I taught this topic. I blew their minds because they had no idea. They didn't learn about it in school. And when I showed them 300 slides of medical references and research relating to this topic. They just couldn't believe something was so prevalently researched and so inadequately taught in their education. Point being, most doctors are just unaware of it. And even if they were, many of them shy away from nutrition and nutritional supplements because they don't know enough about it. So it's a mismatch. You either have to get somebody one way or the other. I think there could be a middle ground, but not until medical school curriculum is not dominated by pharmacy industry's influence. And we know that to be the case. Okay. Can I do a crash course on boron? Sure. We've got lots more crash courses planned this year, so stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe if you want to get to those. Let's see here. Could I think there's a misspelling, Lauren. Do you mean erythromyalgia or erythromelalgia? Because erythromelalgia is a very rare autoimmune condition, and it is a vascular inflammation, so I think that's maybe what you mean. So question is, could it be secondary to too much homocysteine, and could taking B2 possibly help improve symptoms? Possibly, but I can tell you there's not very many cases, even in the world of erythromelalgia. I actually treated years ago one of the, it's a very rare disease, and at the time, I don't know if this is still true, but at the time there were like 12 cases reported in the entire world. And we got this woman from not being able to walk to being able to walk almost a half a mile after we changed her diet and started adding supplements that she was deficient in back into her diet so that her inflammation could be better controlled. So, would taking B2 help you? Possibly, but I would say more than anything, get with a doctor and get some testing done, because that's not a condition you want to play around with. Can chronic sinus meds lower vitamin B levels? Well, we've got to give me examples of which meds you're taking, because there's a lot of different classes of medications in the sinus category. Steroids is a perfect example. Steroids definitely cause nutritional deficit in a very big way. So Lucy, I think you're kind of falling back. Your question is, how do you lower manganese and aluminum that was found in hair analysis? I would say don't use hair analysis to measure those and think that you need to lower them necessarily. You have to look at other parameters, not just the hair. You can't make that determination from the hair alone. Let's see. Would it be ideal to take a full spectrum of vitamins and minerals instead of isolating? I think I answered that question a few times. You mentioned light sensitivity as a sign of B2 deficiency. Does that include overhead lights? It can. It's light sensitivity. It doesn't have to be sunlight, but where people tend to notice it the most is when they step outside and grab for the sunglasses or grab for them when they're driving in the car. I love that. Ken says, thanks for answering my question. B vitamins are starting to change my life. I love it. Love it. Love that you're finding that it's making a difference for you. The difference between vitamin B and activated vitamin B is marketing. Truly the difference is certain vitamins are when they're produced. So let me give you an example. Methylcobalamin is a form of B12 that's activated. Your body doesn't have to activate it, whereas if you took cyanocobalamin, you'd have to activate that. Same thing with riboflavin. Riboflavin is not activated. Riboflavin 5-phosphate is. So an activated B vitamin is something that has been manipulated chemically so that your body easily to that vitamin in order for it to work properly. So if something's activated, that's what that's supposed to mean. Now marketing there's a lot of loose language in marketing. So some people will use the word activated loosely and unethically. So, part of it is you have to be cautious and be aware. Best thing you can do is go back and look at my nutritional crash course library. Look at that library, because that library has, I think we've got like 30 different hours of video tutorials on all these different nutrients where I discuss which ones are activated forms for you. Okay, I have mild scoliosis, 23 and still young enough to correct this. Going to a chiro? Oh, and you're still young enough to do it. Yeah, I mean, if you want to correct a scoliosis that's mild, you got to go see a chiropractor. No, hands down, there's nobody better to treat spinal conditions that are non-surgical than a chiropractor. And what you won't correct, just so you know, you will not correct a scoliosis by simply doing adjustments or having your chiropractor adjust you. You've got to take action. And that chiropractor who does scoliotic treatment is going to give you all kinds of exercises, postural techniques. They're going to give you potentially even, some of them give braces depending on how aggressive your scoliosis is. But yes, a chiropractor is definitely the right person to go see. Okay. Well, we're 12 minutes over time, so we got to wrap it, folks. Thanks for spending Monday night with me. Hey, make sure that if you want to get more information like this, that you subscribe. We're being censored more and more every day. The best way to make sure you receive our information is to come visit me at glutenfreesociety.org and sign up for our newsletter. Sign up. There's a bar right across the top of the page where you can sign up to receive for free our newsletter, and that's also how I communicate when we're doing live shows and what topics we're covering and communicate with you. So if you don't want censorship, you know, basically keeping you from my information, the best way to make sure you handle that is to go and sign up at glutenfreesociety.org. Again, thanks for spending your Monday. We'll see you next Monday night for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Take care. Hey, don't forget to tune in next week, same time, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time for another Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain show. Bring all your toughest health questions to me. I look forward to answering them. And before you leave today, make sure you hit subscribe. And once you do, click that bell. That bell is going to allow us to remind you right before we go live. But it's also going to allow us to remind you when we come out with other video content all week long. We've got lots of episodes coming your way all week long, and I don't want you to miss anything. So again, subscribe, hit that bell so that you can get notified when we have that new information put up for you. Thanks so much, and I'm wishing you excellent health. Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday night.